This time on Engine Masters presented by AMSOIL, it is a true head-to-head shootout as we look at the price versus power of a factory iron Vortec head versus an aftermarket CNC ported aluminum head. If you watch a lot of the Engine Masters show, you probably remember this small block Chevy because we used it in the episode where we did a shootout of the 383 Chevy versus a 383 Mopar. And this one lost just a little bit. And so we're gonna hop it up in this episode by installing a set of aluminum heads, CNC ported stuff. I think it's obvious to everybody they're gonna make more power, but the question is how much more power and what's your value for that so that you can decide if you want a set of aftermarket heads or if you can live with a set of iron Vortec heads that came off this engine. Now let's go through the combo. This thing is a Blueprint Engines crate motor. It's 383 cubic inches. It's about 9.8 to 1 compression. It has a hydraulic roller cam in it, which is 230, 236 at 50. The lift is 510, 520. Up top, we've got a Blueprint Engines cast aluminum dual plane high-rise intake manifold, and we've topped it with a Holley Ultra XP 850 CFM double pumper. So now let's get into the dyno room where we're gonna show you the baseline of this engine with the iron Vortec heads on it. It's time for the AMSOIL Happy Juice. You might not realize that oil not only lubricates the engine, but it actually cools off internal components as well. The oil they recommended for this 383, because it's not a really high-powered engine, doesn't need a race oil. This is the Premium Protection 1040. The guys at AMSOIL pointed out that when you are changing cylinder heads, you might be going to a head with a stiffer valve spring and things like that. The stiffer your valve spring, the more wear points you've got at the pushrod tip and in the rocker arm and at the lifter. They really like to see a good zinc oil, and that's what this is. Let's sauce it up. .465 pound-feet of torque and 440 horsepower. That's actually pretty good.
That thing was pretty stout, man. I wasn't expecting that out of an iron head.
That's, I think, kind of what you'd expect. I mean, those things, that Vortec head's pretty good.
That's a Chevy Vortec, basically a stock head, right?
Yeah, stock casting.
Isn't that considered to be kind of like the premier iron head for street stuff and has been for the last 10 years or so?
Completely the best production iron head for a small block Chevy, non-negotiable.
Better than a turbo head?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a bunch of guys posting right now going, no, the camel hump was the one.
The two hump head was the best one.
Yeah. Now we're gonna go put the aluminum heads on and see what happens. We just made 440 horsepower with a stock Chevrolet production iron cylinder head, which is pretty good. And we're gonna compare it to see if there's value in buying this aftermarket aluminum head. We're gonna talk about 3 different aspects of these 2 heads here. First, I'm gonna inform you where you can get your hands on a set of these Vortec heads. Second of all, we'll look at the functional differences between the 2. And finally, we'll talk about the price and value between these 2 cylinder heads. Let's look first at where you can get yourself a set of Vortec heads. These were used in GMC and Chevy trucks from about '99 to 2006. You can find them in vans and pickups. You can identify them because they're center bolt valve covers. They also have a straight up and down intake manifold bolt pattern. And you want to look for a casting number under the valve cover rail that ends in either 082 or 906. This happens to be a 906. And you know what? You can go junkyard hunting for these things all you want, or you can buy them from the aftermarket. A lot of people have started casting these again, or just prepping them and selling them to you direct. Now let's look at the functional differences between these 2 cylinder heads, and really, it's gonna come down to airflow. This thing has a regular production as cast 170 cc intake runner, whereas this Blueprint Engines aluminum head has a 210 cc intake runner and it's CNC ported. And you might have heard that term thrown around. It means computer numerical controlled, which refers to the multi-axis mill that's used to port the cylinder head, which used to be a job that had to be done by hand, but now they can duplicate the exact port shape every single time. Generally, it's more expensive to buy a CNC ported cylinder head than it is to buy a as cast head. but they generally perform better. And they'll port not only the intake, but also the exhaust and the chamber. Next, let's talk about the chamber design. Now, the Vortec has a 64cc chamber that's a really good high swirl design. As a matter of fact, the aftermarket has ripped this off a lot because it's really good. The production cylinder head comes with a 1.94-inch intake valve and a 1.5 exhaust. Blueprint Engines has hopped this up with a 202 intake and a 1.600 exhaust. The chamber in the aluminum head is a 66cc chamber, so just a little bit less compression than the Vortec head, and it has a 208 intake valve and a 1.600 exhaust. Aside from that, these both bolt up the same way, and in fact, a neat feature of the Blueprint head is that on the intake surface, it's drilled for both a Vortec intake manifold or a conventional intake manifold. Finally, let's talk about value and how it's going to affect you. These things you can pick up in a junkyard still for like 50 bucks each, but then you're gonna have to machine them. And really you need to think about that because these come with a valve spring retainer that is gonna hit the valve guide if you use a cam with more than somewhere between 420 and 470 lift. It kind of varies depending on the production tolerance. But that means you can't run much cam with these straight out of the box, and you really don't wanna run press-in rocker studs. Blueprint Engines has actually upgraded this set with a screw-in stud. So keep that in mind, that machine work that you're gonna need if you buy a set of these cheap. But in truth, you can go to the aftermarket or to a rebuilder and buy a set of Vortec heads that's completely set up with everything you need, and they're going to be between 600 and 800 bucks. This Blueprint Engines head is 969 bucks. So you buy two of those versus two of these, and honestly, this is about 1,200 bucks more money. So when we get in the dyno, we know that this cylinder head is gonna make more power. The question is, how much more, and is that gain worth it to you?
So the myth here is this should probably make less torque by old school thinking with the bigger port and...
There's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way.
I'm not buying into old school.
Yeah, no. I don't think so either.
Okay, yeah, that's,
that's
better. Big mystery. As you can see, the higher flowing head made more power everywhere except for this little anomaly right here at 3,400 RPM where they overlaid perfectly. Now we saw 478 pound-feet of torque with the aluminum head and 465 with the iron head, so that's a gain. Up in the horsepower department, we saw 476 with the aluminum head and 440 with the iron head, but we distinctly have a valve spring float problem here. It's losing control of the valve, and we think that if we were to change those springs and move it up here, you'd see as much as 485 horsepower with the aluminum head. So clearly that's a win on the behalf of the aluminum cylinder head. What a shocker.
Yeah.
We learned that we actually made more power with aftermarket heads with bigger ports and bigger valves and more airflow.
That's why we're the engine masters.
Exactly.
Everyone else is the audience, right?
Who would have even guessed?
Yeah.
But actually, that's not the point. I think everyone knew that these were going to make more power. The question is, what is the value of them? Because a set of iron Vortec heads that is prepped is neighborhood of 600 to 800 bucks. So these are $1,200 more expensive than the iron heads. Is that worth the power we made?
Yeah, on the upside though, you're giving up about 40 pounds of dead weight and picking up 40 horsepower at the top end, so.
It's true, and I think the lesson is you can never go wrong with the best cylinder head you can afford, but I think at this power level, you could probably get a cheaper as-cast head and do just as well.
That's probably the best compromise, really. That 383 probably doesn't really need the CNC head, and you still lose the 40 pounds, which I really like.
Yep.
Yeah.
What should we do with this thing next?
I don't know. Let's find something to drop it into.
We'll have to figure that out and do it on the next episode of Engine Masters presented by AMSOIL. But in the meantime, do us a favor and check out MotorTrendOnDemand.com. It's our subscription video service where there's a whole bunch of gearhead content. And of course, check us on social media. On Instagram, we are Engine Masters, and on Facebook, we're Hot Rod Engine Masters. CNC is computer numerical controlled and refers to the function of a multi-axis mill that can go into any kind of a, that refers to a multi-axis mill that is used to port cylinder heads, which used to be a hand job. Which used to be a hand job.
It'll do it again.
Your right shoulder down a little bit. That's an awkward job. Yeah, no, don't worry. It's fine. It is really.
Is it like a Seinfeld episode where Elaine's doing her dance thing?
All right.